Well, the problem of financial abuse of older Australians is not a new one, and particularly the concern that family members are, well, sometimes trying to raid the inheritance of their parents and grandparents early. The Australian Banking Association today has stepped up an effort to push for some tougher rules, tougher laws around this. Anna Bligh, the head of the Australian Banking Association, joins me now. Look, thanks for your time, Anna Bligh. How widespread is the problem right now when it comes to financial elder abuse?
Good afternoon, David. This is not an easy one to get very comprehensive numbers on because many people are reluctant to report it, particularly, as you say, if the abuse is being perpetrated by an adult son or daughter, where there are issues like access to grandchildren at stake. It might be a brother or a sister or a very trusted, lifelong friend. So we do know, for example, that Seniors Rights Australia, which is one of the agencies that people go to for help, on average see about 700 people a year who are experiencing this kind of difficulty. That's just one organisation. So I think we can say we know in banks that it is happening too often to too many people, and the circumstances in which it's happening are often just heartbreaking.
So what are you calling on the government to do?
Australian banks are often right at the front line of this issue. It's bank staff who often see an older person being coerced into withdrawing cash out of the branch. It is bank systems that increasingly can identify suspicious transactions and to question that. What banks are looking for, and I think it would also help other professional people, nurses in aged care homes, accountants who also see suspicious behaviour, is 3 pieces of law reform. Each of these were recommended by the Australian Law Reform Commission in a report to government just on 2 years ago. Firstly, the establishment of a national register of powers of attorney so that banks can verify quickly whether someone who claims to be able to or claims to have authority to act on your account really have that authority. Secondly, uniform powers of attorney legislation around Australia. Every state and territory has different laws, and that's becoming an increasingly difficult thing for bank staff and for customer advocates to navigate. And finally, an agency in every state and territory that suspicions can be reported to, who have sufficient investigatory powers to get to the bottom of what's happening, but can deal with that while recognising the complexity of situations involving family members.
And look, these all sound like fair enough ideas for the association to put to government, but what about the banking industry itself? We did see during the Royal Commission, of course, examples of older Australians, older customers of the banks not being treated terribly well at all, whether it was, guaranteeing loans for their children that they weren't really explained what the risks involved might be. I seem to recall an elderly pensioner was threatened with evacuation, being booted out of their home because a loan had gone bad. Have the banks themselves done enough to ensure the protection of older Australians?
David, there's no doubt that Australian banks have got a lot of work to do to implement the recommendations of the Royal Commission. That work is currently underway, but I think it's very important that banks are able to, walk, talk and chew gum at the same time. Yes, they need to make sure that they're treating their customers as well as they possibly can. But as I said, there's 140,000 bank staff out there, good people who go to work every day and who see their customers in very distressing circumstances. They shouldn't ignore that. Part of improving the banking experience is making sure that when bank staff see customers being coerced and ripped off by family members, that they can do something about it and are encouraged to do so.
I appreciate that. But can I ask you this as well? Can you guarantee today that no older Australians, no older bank customers are going to be still charged fees for service after they're dead?
Yes, I can, David. Those matters have been rectified in the new Code of Banking Practice. It has become, it's been endorsed and approved by ASIC. It took effect on the 1st of July. And what I can say is that if any of those clauses, including that one, are breached, then customers have a remedy in order to correct that if it does happen. So I do think it's important to recognise that this campaign is not being run by banks alone. This is a coalition of banks, seniors organisations that represent older people across Australia, and importantly, a very
and I'm sure that's true, but some of those organisations also
organisation.
complain when banks do things like shutting down branches. That impacts on older Australians as well.
Banking is changing for everybody. And interestingly, one of the issues that has been discussed extensively with seniors organisations, on the one hand, as banking has become more digital, yes, it does mean that some people are less able to contact, someone in a branch. But on the other hand, it's meant for some older Australians that they can be financially independent for a lot longer, because if they are physically frail and unable to get out of the house very often, they can nevertheless be financially independent and not have to rely on someone else to do their banking for them. So these, we're living through probably one of the biggest changes in how people bank for decades, and it's going to affect people differently. But at the heart of financial elder abuse is the fact that it's generally perpetrated by the person or persons that you love and trust the most in your family. And it's an abuse of that trust, and it's what makes people in their later years vulnerable. Because when you trust a family member, your own son or daughter, and then that trust is abused because someone drains your account, unlike a bank that might make an error, that is very hard to remedy. And that's what we want to see a better job done of.
Indeed. All right, Anna Bligh from the Australian Banking Association. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.